A joint project with two colleagues from the University of Catania, where we try to estimate the effects that international migration agreements have on certain migration flows. So just some background. We focus on the case of the European Union and on what is known as the external dimension of EU migration policy. What is the external dimension of EU migration policy? Is a set of agreements that the European Union does with a number of countries of origin. And it can be individual agreements entirely dedicated to migration, or it can be single migration clauses within agreements which have other contents. So my colleagues have actually, in a separate project, mapped these agreements. And between 2000 and 2020, they found out that 2012 such instruments, so again, it can be an agreement, it can be a clause within an agreement, have been made, involving 47 countries in different continents, and this type of tools, we call them, can be of different types. We have mission agreements, formal, informal, visa facilitation, migration dialogues, Frontex arrangements, and so forth and so on. So there are different sort of tools, instruments that the European Union uses to try and affect migration from the source, so to speak. Now, this is supposed to have important effects on migration flows. It's actually believed to be one of the few real instruments for affecting migration, again, at the source that the European Union and its member states have. But the effects, for what we know, have never been actually measured in any way. There have been no such attempts. So they're mostly been analyzed in terms of their governance rather than possible effects, which is what we would like to do. So we want to estimate the effects of migration agreement on forced migration flows to the European Union. I'm presenting a very, you will see, exploratory analysis. So some preliminary results on the effects of asylum application, on the effects of such agreements or tools on asylum applications in the European Union. But we are actually, I mean, there is an analysis ongoing on irregular border crossings, which we actually expect would be even more interesting. And in this particular presentation, we focus on one particular tool, readmission agreements, both formal and informal. And I will show the results on a few selected countries. There are a number of other additional caveats that I will mention along the road. So our research design, again, our objective is estimating the effects of the policy intervention, in this case, these sort of agreements, on an outcome, which in our case is asylum seeking of nationals of the country of the intervention in Europe. The constraint we have, which is typical of observational studies, we can only observe the flow of asylum seekers before the intervention and after the intervention. Obviously, we cannot observe the counterfactual. What would have happened in the absence of the intervention? So what would be the flow if that particular agreement was not done between the European Union and that particular country of origin? Okay. As an approach to address this particular case, which was a synthetic control method, I will quickly mention the way it works, because some of you may not be fully familiar. So a synthetic control method works by creating a synthetic replica of the outcome of interest. So again, in our case, it's flow. Well, I'll make an example very soon. A flow of asylum applicants. This is our outcome of interest. And you create a synthetic replica based on several other cases. And then you observe how this synthetic replica behaves in the absence of the intervention. So in the absence of, in this case, of the agreement. And then you measure the difference between the real outcome, so the flow after the intervention, and the synthetic outcome, the synthetic flow without intervention. And you attribute the difference to the outcome. So how we create our controls, again, our outcome is flow asylum seekers of nationality X. Let's imagine Ivory Coast. I'm actually going to show some data on Ivory Coast. The intervention is the European Union external dimension instrument with country of nationality of Ivory Coast. In our case, it would be an informal return agreement with Ivory Coast signed in 2018. And the synthetic control is a linear approximation, which is a sort of a weighted average of top 50 nationalities of the case of Ivory Coast nationals, asylum seekers. Let me show this. So what you see, sorry, I'm looking for the pointer. No, okay. So what you see here is that, so the gray line is the observed flow, and the pink line is the synthetic flow, which is again, it's done with, it's a sort of a weighted average of other countries to match. It's done with the matching algorithms actually. As you can see, this matches quite well the real flow, right? Then you have the intervention, and you observe the real flow, which goes down, compared to the synthetic flow, which stays on a higher level. So then your assumption there will be that this gap, the difference between what you observe and the synthetic case, is due to the policy intervention, which didn't affect the synthetic control, of course. Then you can also have, there are a bunch of interesting statistics. Here you see the weights of single control units, so how important single cases were in matching the synthetic control. So in this case, the most important countries which were used to create the synthetic replica were Guinea, Haiti, Colombia, and Nigeria, for some reasons. And then the variable weight. In this case, we're actually running an autoregressive estimation. So it's using the lag of application in previous months that we're planning on doing with data on drivers, but I will mention that later. So this is the way it works, the way the approach works. These are our data. So again, outcome asylum applications in the EU by national of all countries of origin. We have monthly data from 1999 to 2022. Like I was mentioning, we're working on including drivers, world development indicators on GDP, population, employment, and quality of governance. But so far, it's just autoregressive. We can also use yearly data, but the problem is with yearly data, they have much less statistical power, of course. So for that reason, we are running this analysis at the monthly frequency. Now, let me show you some results. You've already seen one, but I will start with Ethiopia this time. So in this case, you see a slightly worse fit between the observed case, well, the real Ethiopia and the synthetic Ethiopia, but still the synthetic Ethiopia matches the real flow, the general trend of the real flow quite well. And then they diverge after the intervention. And in the case of Ethiopia, you see a reduction in the number of asylum applications. So you may assume that here the effect was one of reducing the flow of asylum applicants. Here, by the way, it estimates the synthetic replica in a completely different way. You see, you have a much higher number of countries which are needed by the algorithm to estimate synthetic Ethiopia. Maybe that's also why it doesn't match that well. And variable weights also working a different way. Ivory Coast, you've seen it before. Same story, much better match pre-intervention. So maybe more reliable. And then this gap, which lasts for a couple of years, and then the two flows sort of converge again, meaning maybe the effect was not long-term in this case. In the case of Guinea, interestingly, you see something else. You see that the observed applications go up. So contrary to our expectations. But by the way, I'm not sure it should be, this is one of the limitations we have so far. We didn't really theorize explicitly on the possible effects of these agreements, but this is a possible actually consequence if you think about it, that if migrants know that their country is striking a deal, a remission agreement they may apply in higher number just in order to avoid to be returned. This is actually there is some impressionistic evidence that this is the case with the Tunisian in Italy. And then finally, we have the case of Gambia. It's 4 interesting cases. Now I will tell you why I think they're interesting, where you have an effect which is anticipated, which happens before the intervention. So something else happened here, which made the 2 flows observed and synthetic diverge. So let me sum up. These are the countries which I showed. This is when the intervention happened. And then the 3rd column is the effect that you see. So in 3 cases, we see a reduction in 3 out of 4 cases, which based on this approach, we should assume was due to these interventions. In 1 case, you see an increase. Possible reason, unobserved confounder, which I think is our biggest analytical challenge, interventions in other countries. So you may have an agreement with a country on the route, which of course affects at a different time or the same time, which affects that flow in the absence of an intervention in the country of origin. I will mention this later, but again, this is currently, we think, so this is the challenge we are trying to address now. Well, these are some data on some Asian countries where we also run it. But okay, I will skip to the conclusions. So we think this approach does have some potential. We think we do see something, we do some effects which seem to be systematic, although they go in partly different ways in some selected cases. So it may vary across countries, which makes sense, but we need to work more on that and theorize, like I was saying, the possible effects of the interventions, including on different types of flows. Because again, asylum seekers probably should have tested this on irregular arrivals first, because asylum seekers is not exactly a flow or arrivals. It is a flow, a slightly different thing, which also incorporates administrative lags and so forth and so on. Anyway, so we need to theorize on the effects of these interventions and thinking about possible effects in different types of flows and replicate these and select cases in a bit of a more systematic way to permit proper hypothesis testing. We also know that we need to do more work on modeling. So include data on migration drivers to go beyond these autoregressive representations. Select control cases more accurately to limit these effects of confounders that we really think will be there. And then incorporate explicitly this possible effect of the roots. So modeling these network effects among countries within the analysis so that we can account for that. And then finally, we also want to replicate on irregular arrivals. Okay, I will spare you the supplementary materials and I will stop here. Thank you very much.
Very much. Thank you very much to the organizer for inviting me. I'm very happy. I'm learning a lot. So I'm a bit outsider of, I mean, from the presentation that we had already. So this is gonna be much less innovative than any of the presentations. So this is the title of the paper, but actually I'm just presenting the methodology. Actually, I follow the instruction of the okay. So the 3 questions that I will try to address in this talk is, the first one is how many irregular migrants are residing in Spain. The second one is what is its demographic composition and where do they work? By where do they work, I mean in which sectors do they work? And to answer these 3 questions, I will implement 2 methods that has been already implemented in the literature, but I just refreshing to you. The first one is the residual method, which consists, as you will see, comparing the total number of migrants that are residing in the country with the total number of migrants that are legally residing in the country. That's the intuition. And that method will help to answer the first and the second question with the data that is available in Spain. And the second method is a little bit more innovative, let's say, is combining microdata from two different labor sources, which is the Spanish labor force survey, which is very similar to the one that Stefan, or I don't remember the name, one Italian speaker that we have among the many of them, that explain about the UK. So this is going to be the same data, but for Spain. So labor force survey, the homogeneous one for the EU, and then the Spanish Social Security Register. And then I'm not gonna have time to explain two applications, but just to have a hint of in what applications can be studied with this kind of methods is to estimate the impact of a potential regularization policy and the impact of voting in irregular migration. So the residual method, just the definition, very simple. In the question 1, we have that the estimation of the irregular migration is the difference between MT, which is the total number of migrants residing in a country, in this case Spain, minus the number of regular migrants, so the migrants that are legally residing in the country, minus a third term, which is QR, which is the number of quasi-legal migrants. So first, I didn't say this is applied, I'm just restricting to non-EU migrants, okay? And what I'm going to explain now is how to estimate these three terms. I mean, what I mean by these three terms and how I'm going to estimate them. So the first one, the simplest one, but it's not the easiest one to estimate, I would say, is MT, which is the total number of migrants residing in the country. The second term, MR, are gonna be calculated or computed as the number of migrants with valid resident permits. And the third one, the quasi-legal non-EU, is gonna be composed by three terms. The first one are the students with study permits, which are not in the MR component. Second, the migrants with expired resident permits, but are in process of renewing. So these are people that don't enter in MR because they don't have actually a valid resident permit, but they are in the process of renewing. So, you know, bureaucracy takes time sometimes. So those, if you compare just the statistic, they are gonna be irregular, but with a high probability they will get the permit in the future. So actually you can contemplate them as quasi-legal. And the third one is the asylum seekers that are pending of resolution. So this, well, I will now say where are the data sources, but this data is provided by the Eurostat, and it's just the number of people that, you know, applied for a asylum visa, so they are residing in Spain. If you, they are not in MR because they don't have a valid resident permit, but with a probability they will get the asylum visa, and therefore they will get probably in the future, with some probability, they will get legal. If you have any clarification question, you can interrupt. Or you can wait until the end, as we have been doing. So for the data, so the accuracy of the method highly relies on the estimation, well, it relies on the estimation of the three terms, but mostly on the first term. So the first term is just the number of, the total number, as I remind you, is the total number of migrants residing in Spain. The way I estimate, I use the official register of the municipality, okay? So the source is the Spanish Statistical Institute. Of course, and the accuracy of this estimate depends on whether migrants register in the municipality, of course. Why we think that Spain is why we claim that Spain is a good why we claim that Spain is a good case study for the reliability of this registration. We believe that is because it's a good approximation because migrants have in Spain high incentives to register in the municipality because their health and also the public health system and the public education system access is conditional on the registration of the municipality. Okay? But the assumption here is that we take the total migrant population as the number of people registered. So as of course, if we undercount, we are gonna downward bias the irregular migration stock if we undercount those. For the second term, the resident permits, this is also very good in Spain because it's data publicly available in the website of the ministry. Unfortunately, they changed like a couple of months ago. They changed the way they deliver the numbers completely. So in order to update my estimates, I have to change completely the way to download the data. You know, this is classic Spanish bureaucracy thing, but it's available. You need to take a lot of time, but you can do. Or you can send me an email and I will send you. So you can save time. The good thing also is that, apart from my critiques, it's very good that they have put this available. And actually it's very good because they can give you information on sex, age, nationality, region, so it's very detailed. They can also give you, and this is very important, the motive of the residence permit, and they give you also the type, whether it's permanent residence, whether it's temporary for 1 year, for 2 years, so whether it's for family reunification, for labor motives, etc. So it's very good data. And this is important for the estimation of the third term, the quasi-legal or quasi-regular, because here is an assumption. I need to assume or to give a probability that people that before had a temporary resident permit, they will be in the process of renewing it, okay? And I will put as legal a fraction of them, because I will claim that a fraction of them will renew their permits. So let's say there are 100 migrants that have a temporary residence permit. I was in my estimation, I will say that 20% of them will have in the future the resident permit expired, but they are gonna be renewed. Okay. And then for as I said, in this term, I also have the students, because it's not in the resident permit. So the students is also information provided by the Ministry of Social Security, and the asylum seekers the data is provided by the Eurostat. So with that, you can just put all the terms together and subtract, and you get the aggregate. And because the data is by sex, by age, and by nationality, you can also provide the estimates by these characteristics. So before going to the results, which, well, might be interesting, but first let me highlight the main issues with the estimation. So what I think, and also my experience with the estimates, I find that some groups the estimates are very low. Okay, so this is a fact. Now, my claim, so my idea or my argument is that some groups, what this estimation, the problem of this estimation is that some groups have low incentives to register in the municipality, and that will downward bias the estimation of irregular migration. I think this could be problematic for young people, because the incentives to register are based on the use. I mean, so you have high intensive to register because you will have access to the health system, but young people might think that they are healthy, so they are not going to use the health system, and that would create less incentive to register. This is my claim. Of course, I don't know because I don't know how many irregular migrants. That's the full thing, the whole thing. But that's my argument. Also, that could happen with Africans. With this estimate in Spain, you have very low estimate of irregular Africans. I don't know if this is okay or not. I don't know, but that's what I find. So yeah, one could think that maybe because they don't speak Spanish, they might find that it's not very useful to go to the health system. I don't know, or maybe it's okay and there are not many irregular migrants in Spain. And then third problem is the level of aggregation. As I said, you can disaggregate by sex, by gender, by nationality, but the truth is that the lower the level of aggregation, you get higher, so more noisy estimates. And that is a bit problematic, for example, for some countries, Ecuador or China, that you have, I mean, China is not low level of aggregation actually, but you get negative numbers for the estimation. Yeah, how to improve the data? I mean, after this workshop, I realized that there are many much better ways of estimating irregular migration. But if you find this interesting, how to improve it, I would say that still there is a problem with the estimate that is provided. With the residence permits is not provided for all nationalities, only for the major groups. So that is a bit annoying. It's very time consuming, as I said. So the format is terrible, but yeah, that can be solved by just spending more time in collecting the data. And then probably the key issue with this estimation is whether actually migrants are registered in the municipality, because we have a lot of anecdotal evidence that many people don't do it. So yeah. Okay, so this is just the estimation, around 500,000. So the good thing is that about this is that, so for example, this drop in 2004, well, there were two things. First, this is non-EU. Before 2005, Romania was there, then it's not. So that's one of the reasons for the drop. The second reason is the massive regularization that happened in Spain in 2005. And if you compare that drop, so it's quite consistent with the drop. So sorry, the drop here is quite consistent with the number of people that got the residence permit after the regularization. So at least in difference, the method I think is quite good. And usually Spain is argued that is a good case for this method. This is in terms of the. So this is the as fraction of total migrants, non-EU migrants, non-EU, so around 15%. This is nationality, but I will go directly to this in 3 minutes. So the second method, which might be a little bit more interesting, is used to answer the question of what is the sectoral composition of, let's say, I'm not gonna say irregular migrants, informal migrants, and this will be clear in a second. So what I'm doing now is comparing two numbers: the number of non-EU migrants that are estimated to be working according to the labor force survey, which is the ET, and the EF is the number of migrants that are estimated to be working. I mean, not estimated. The number of non-EU migrants that are working in the formal sector according to the Social Security. So this is not an estimation. This is just the accounting. So the Social Security gives you the number of people that are working. So that's the number there. And this is an estimation, because this data is from the labor force survey. Okay. So comparing these two, you get an estimate of the informal sector. And you apply that for non-EU, and you get, again, informal sector, which of course is not the same as regular migrants, because some regular migrants might work in the informal sector. And now, once you get this number, what you can do is to go to the microdata. Okay, what I'm gonna show you is what I did, which is going to the Spanish labor force survey microdata to get the sectoral composition of workers. Okay, so that will give you an overview of the sectors where total non-human, so where formal and informal work, or formal and informal non-EU workers work, okay? And then I will go to the social security microdata, and I will get, again, the sectoral composition, but that is only for formal sectors, okay? So the difference between the two sectoral composition will give me somehow sort of, okay, the difference between the two will give me the idea of the sectoral composition of the informal workers. Okay, so this relies on the microdata. So on the one hand, this is publicly available, the labor force survey. On the other hand, the social security data is also public, sorry, but and it's free, but it's upon request. So you need to apply a formal, but it's easy to get it. You need to just give a research proposal, and that's it. So this is the idea. You compute the number of employed in the labor force survey, the number of employed in social security. The difference will be informal. Sorry, this is not irregular, informal. And the share, I mean, the number is real. You never know, but it's somehow reasonable, 20%. And this is what I said. In the second step, you take the share of for both regular and total, and you compute the difference, and you will get as a residual the share of informal, sorry. And then you get a hint of where informal migrants could work. So, I mean, of course, this is not super rigorous, but, you know, I think the numbers are quite reasonable, and it could be, I don't know, somehow useful for some applications. I think that's, yeah, I know.
Thank you. Actually, I changed the focus slightly after corresponding last, and I'm going to be talking about Germany, but not the US, because actually the method we applied to Germany is more interesting. This was with my former position at the Datum Institute in Berlin, where together with Frank Duvel and inspired by methods suggested by Georges Lemaitre, former head of social statistics at the OECD, we tested and applied another variant of the residual method for estimating irregular migrants resident in Germany. There have been previous estimates of the total figure, the stock figure of irregular residents in Germany, perhaps the most prominent one by Dieter Vogel in 2015, with a rather broad range from 180,000 to 520,000, and from our assessment, erroneous one published by the Pew Research Center that was a bit higher, up to 700,000. With different methods, although the Pew study also used some form of residual method. Actually, Lemaitre suggests two separate estimation methods and formulas. I'm only presenting the first one here because the second one, I'm presenting both, would have covered maybe 40 minutes, not 20. And so this is going to be the residual model. The advantage of both methods, but also of the residual model, is that it can be applied with available data without any need for additional surveys or additional sources. And it relies on two main assumptions that I've spelled out here. And these are that over time, even irregular migrants do participate in social surveys, at least to some degree. First assumption. And the second assumption is that the undercoverage of migrants in surveys that is known decreases over time. So given enough time of residence in a country, there will be higher participation rates of migrants and also of irregular migrants. And if these assumptions hold and the formulas work, there should be a positive residual between two data sources. One data source that covers inflows of migrants into a country, and the other one covering stocks of migrants present in the country. And that difference, that residual, is then the estimate of irregularly staying migrants. We tested it with a time series on new immigrants or recent immigrants to Germany starting in 1998. Foreign citizens, and also separately we ran several dozen models, with and without Aussiedler, which is a specific category to Germany of ethnic Germans that were granted special status in Germany, and there's still some inflows. So what these estimates would cover is clandestine, those particular groups of irregular stayers that enter in a hidden way, clandestine, and subsequently stay irregularly, and also overstayers who initially had a permit or a legal status and then overstayed that short-term or non-permanent permit. Not covered would be, because these are numbers that are known already, that are already in the official statistics for Germany, failed asylum seekers, so-called failed asylum seekers who are already in the foreigners' residence register, AZR, and also permit overstayers as far as they are covered in the AZR. So if there's once a regular permit, that person remains in the data until they leave, with an obvious question then coming up. What I'm showing you here is the relationship of three main data sources that are used or can be used for the number of foreign citizens in Germany. And it's already showing one of the first problems that we have with the data. In blue, you have the AZR numbers, which is the foreigners' residence register. Every foreign citizen is registered there, and you can see in all curves basically an increase over time. Time series ends here end of 2019. And the figure in red is the population statistic. So yeah, also important to know the AZR is maintained by the BAMF, the authority responsible for the also for asylum seekers and for foreigners. And the population statistic comes from the Statis, the National Statistics Agency. So there is a clear difference between the data sources, and you can see here in the red line that there was a post-census correction for the population statistic, where the total numbers were total number of foreigners was reduced by around 1 million foreigners at that time. Correspondingly, in the orange and dashed and dotted lines is the labor force survey total number of foreigners in the country, which is adjusted, basically calibrated to that population statistic. And since that post-census adjustment 2011, the labor force totals and also the population statistics are consistently below the AZR number of foreigners. What is important, in addition to these estimates, we agreed at the Institute in our project that the validity of our results should come from the method and from the data, and not depend on prior untested assumptions, outcomes of other estimation methods that we take as granted as a starting point, because that was one of the path dependencies and one of the risks that Pew ran into. And obviously that there is no, besides the known number of regular residents, there is no ground truth data to compare it with, so it has to come from the method. The two formulas that are part of this residual method form a two-equation system that can be solved if the data behave as they should. With this first equation here showing you the total number of immigrants, that is P, between year 0 and year N. So you choose from available data the time period that you have. For us, it was 98 to 2018, so a span of 20 years. And the total number of foreign citizens resident in Germany here is simply the number of inflows per year. That is IA, the inflows for of authorized immigrants that is known for any particular year, multiplied by a retention rate that is modeled, retention rate over time, annual retention rate, because there's, of course, outflows and deaths of immigrants, and summed up over the period of years, and then divided by 1 minus PU, which is the unknown, one of the two unknowns, and then the estimate for the share of irregular migrants. So if in the end, for example, PU might be 5%, then 1 minus P, of course, is 95%. And the two unknowns here are PU, exactly what we are interested to arrive at, the share of irregular immigrants, and the retention rate RA, that is also assumed to be unknown. And because we have two unknowns, we need two equations to be able to solve this. The second equation that Lemaitre suggests in the formula is based on the duration of residence, D, also for the time period where you can derive from the labor force survey that is used here, the total number of the total years of duration, that is capital DA, divided by the total number of residents, PA, and then factoring in again the PU, so the share of irregular migrants, and an additional third factor here that is A. And in order to avoid a non-solvable equation system, you basically set A manually. You can actually get it from one of the data sources as well. And then in the end, test different versions of parameters for A to see if it has an effect and what kind of effect it has. So two parameters to estimate, PU and RA. And from the two equation system, you construct the target function that basically looks at the left-hand side and right-hand side of each equation. You then take the squared sum of the differences and apply also a scaling factor, because one equation, as you've just seen, is number of years of residence. So that is somewhere between, let's say, 5 and 10 and 15 years for foreign residents. But the other equation is the number of persons, and that is in the hundreds of thousands. So simply adding the two differences for the equations without scaling factors would give a heavy imbalance to this equation. So you apply a scaling factor to balance both sides out, and then solve this with an estimator, a GRG estimator, gradient. The Greg estimated a gradient reduced regression, I think, and look for a global minimum for that solution, so that both equations solve perfectly, which then gives you the parameter estimates for PU and for R. So far, that's the theory. And now that's the point in the presentation where I have to disappoint you, and where we were also disappointed, because although the method works in theory, it doesn't work in practice. And this is what the result shows. This is basically just the solution space for PU and RA for the retention rate. And there is one global minimum that is good, that is the value here in the forefront, which gives you a parameter estimate of a retention rate of 95.5%. Okay, so you have an annual loss of immigrants over time of 4.5%, but you have a PU of 0, meaning there's no irregular immigrants. And that is not what you exactly. Problem solved, done. And in addition to that, it's not just the PU of 0. It's that the F value that should be 0, because we were looking for a solution to the equation that would perfectly solve, so that both equations balance out. F is clearly not 0, but a 9-digit figure. So 0 is actually the bottom of this graph here. You can see it as a 3-dimensional space. 0 is down here, and the global minimum is up here. So the outcome of our efforts, both with the first and the second method, was a non-finding, in the sense that the method doesn't work for Germany. Now, Lemaitre insists that it can work, and it does work for other countries like the US, like Canada. The devil is in the structure and the relationship of the data sources, and I'm going to jump a bit here and show you this one. If you go back to the beginning, the concept is that there are two data sources, and the residual between the data sources is the estimate of the irregular resident population that is still present in the country. And the idea is that you take inflows of foreigners and then estimates of persons still resident. But the problem is that there is the relationship of the data in Germany is the other way around. The method relies on the concept that the survey data, here in orange, the labor force survey data, has a higher total number of immigrants that is known from compared to the official register. And as you can see here, for all these cohorts of first-time immigrants to Germany, the relationship is exactly the opposite. The official number from the RZR register is always higher. And it is actually known and quite well documented that the RZR overcovers foreign citizens in Germany. There have been corrections to the total numbers because there's known to be an over coverage due to persons that were registered twice or with different spellings of their names, but that create double entries, but actually the same person. And persons who might have left Germany already but never deregistered, and that is not updated in the data. And it is also it is entirely likely that the labor force survey undercovers foreign citizens in total, despite the weights of the survey actually upscaling already the foreign population. So there have been adjustments on both sides, on both data sources, but apparently not large enough to create such a structure that the survey values would be above the register values. And that is a kind of obvious prerequisite for the method to work. So I'm not gonna spend too much time on this. This is basically just different versions of models. We, of course, tested different starting values for the parameters. We tested different scaling factors. We tested including or excluding the Aussiedler population, all with the same result, that there was a none result or no solution. The one solution, the mathematical solution that worked, was when we allowed the p-value to become negative, which is also a nonsensical result. You get a perfect mathematical solution when you allow a negative number of irregular migrants. So the good is, in theory, this method works and could work for any country where you have survey data on immigrants and registered data on immigrants. But there are prior assumptions that need to hold in order to apply this. For Germany, it is currently not applicable. And the one possible solution that I have not yet looked into, because the status of this presentation of the data is 2020. In the meantime, there might have been changes and updates to the data, which I would still have to check. And also, there is no current, or there was no current estimate on the extent of the overcoverage in the RZR or the extent of the undercoverage in the labor force survey data. So the only thing you could have done was to do ad hoc assumptions, or really arbitrary assumptions of if the overcoverage is X% and the undercoverage is Y%, then I get this kind of estimate, but this is rather arbitrary. And what could be the ground truth? What could be the reason for this? It could also be, or it's actually from this, it could be not only the coverage issues, but it could also be that the participation of irregular migrants might actually be very low, and for this reason they might not show up in the labor force survey in such large numbers. It could be that the dark field is actually comparatively small in addition to the known numbers of irregularly staying migrants in Germany. All a bit speculative at this point, with a non-result for the method. And obvious prerequisites that in the future should be tested when the data, when another country is used, is that the total number of remaining immigrant cohorts needs to be greater than the number in the survey data. And this should not also be true in total, but also at least for half of the cohorts used, so that any imbalance in the data over the years does not create arbitrary results. Yeah, thank you.
First, I have to say I'm not a researcher, so I'm 20 years already a policy advisor in the city of Utrecht, especially on undocumented migrants. But maybe also important, I'm the chair of the City Initiative on Migrants with Irregular Status in Europe. It's a network of 59 cities on the moment, and together also with the Compass Institute of Oxford. So I know a little. Before I go to this, well, I first want to say the method we don't want to use. That's the catch and recatch method. Every time, many years, there are done some research on the estimate of undocumented migrants in the Netherlands, and also especially in the 4 big cities like Amsterdam, Rotterdam, Utrecht, and The Hague. And every time, the most, sometimes even half of the population of undocumented migrants in the Netherlands live in Utrecht. And why is that? Because most of the undocumented migrants aren't arrested a second time by the police because of their residence permit. And why aren't they this? I always tease the researchers about, because they are smarter in Utrecht, so they don't read. But the real reason is that we have some agreement, and it's now for 4 years, also an official agreement, that the police doesn't arrest them, only when they are solely on their residence permits. So that method won't work. And because we now have an agreement on that on this program, that the alien police doesn't apprehend anyone who is in this program in the Netherlands, that method won't work anymore. So don't put it in your MIRREM program. First, I explain this. This is the National Undocumented Migrant Facility, LVV in Dutch. That's a program for already, it's a pilot program, but it will be a structural program for already since 2019. And what does it say? It says it's an agreement between national government, local government, and NGOs, and that we give shelter and all kinds of guidance, legal guidance, or other guidance to undocumented migrants, and we give them shelter, and we have shelter places, and you see that in the capacity. These are the cities, and the capacity, for example, in Utrecht, the last one is 235 places. So we know, and that's important. So we know that these people are undocumented, because otherwise you don't come into this facility. We know, I could almost say, we know almost everything about the undocumented migrants. We know the resident permit status, when they come into the Netherlands, all kinds of questions about their nationality, identity, etc., medical conditions, etc. So we are, one thing are sure, this is different than some other matters. We know these are undocumented migrants. That's 100% sure. totally in the whole program, 1,142 places. And the second number is almost 2,400 people were in this facility. So because people get out because they get a residence permit or voluntarily return to their home country, because that's the aim of the program. So on the moment, that's almost the last. There are 730 people in this program, and almost 1,650 are out of the program to return or get a residence permit. So for sure, in these cities, the bigger cities in the Netherlands, these are undocumented migrants of flesh and blood, and they are still alive. When you see this is the actual number, and what you see is that it's going a little bit down, but on average, it's about the same numbers over the 4 years. So there's not a big rise of people in this program. I come later to the who are in this program or not. So this is about the same. The numbers are quite fixed, and that's quite interesting, because when we started, it was 2 years after the big influx of asylum seekers, especially from Syria and Eritrea, but also other countries who are where asylum requests are rejected, and that are potential undocumented migrants for this program. Here you see something about the results. I was already saying, for example, Utrecht, I know the best. The green is that people are getting a residence permit. You see that is a lot. It's different in different cities. And red is, for example, also a residence permit and return. That is the yellow one. It's more in Rotterdam, and it's lower in, for example, Utrecht, and it's bigger also in Amsterdam. So that are the results of that. Now this will be a national program. We are now in negotiations with the national government about it. And it will be 8 municipalities. It will be a national program, and that 8 municipalities will probably have around 2,500 places in 8 shelters, or in 8 municipalities. Shelters can be more, and it will be every year will be around 3,500 undocumented migrants in this program. But then you would think, okay, this is a very low number of undocumented, but of course, many of the undocumented migrants can't get in this program because you, for example, want to work on a solution of your situation, and that is a residence permit or return to your home country. You don't want to do it only if you only want to have a shelter. You don't come into the program, because we want solutions for the program in the program. So there are many people rejected. On average, within the program, it's 40% are rejected. 40% are rejected. So if there were 1,600 in the program, at least you know there are more than 1,200 people rejected. But if you look more closely, and go to the situation in Utrecht, which I know the best, there were 300 people in the shelter every year. But there's also 800 people. I know that from the NGOs, and we know who they are, so we know that they are not the same persons. Next to the 300, 800 people get legal and medical advice. So it's totally of 1,100. We know that some 50 people were in contact with the police. So if you count further, it's 11 further. You can even count much further because, for example, every winter we give also a night shelter, and then around 300-400 other people, undocumented people, are in this shelter because they also registered. So in totally, you come around to 1,500 people. We know they are undocumented a year. Estimates and also some different research in the last 20 years, most of the time come around 3,000 undocumented migrants in Utrecht. So it can be, but that should be researched even better, I think, is that there is a multiplier of 2, sometimes 3, that it depends where you go on, of people, undocumented migrants known in the city, and what the total is. So if you go that way, then and if you look, for example, in Amsterdam, then it is a lot more. They have around 1,000 people in this shelter, and if you multiply it with some of them, then you come around 10-15,000 people. But is that correct? No, that's not correct. For example, because only in Amsterdam, it's clear that not only are there many more undocumented migrants. For example, the estimate, and that's a low estimate, is that there are 10,000 Brazilian undocumented migrants only in Amsterdam. So if this method is, of course, quite difficult because you really have to look at the different migrant groups and undocumented migrants group that are there. But I think what it can be the added value is, and it's also a bit the same with the person from Spain. You know how many people there are in the padron or in the care of the city and the NGOs, and you have to think of who do we don't know. Who do we don't know? And if you find that was also your question at that presentation, if we find some model of thinking of that, and we think of, are there special groups that have a special situation like the Brazilians in Amsterdam, then you could have an estimate. All the estimates in the present research in the Netherlands always say something like between 30,000 and 80,000. But yeah, I could say that also, that you don't know, you don't need to research for that. But I think you have to combine these facts, the undocumented migrants, combine it with different other methods. Now, this is my name, etc. But I think what's interesting is our CMI's network, because there are many cities who also know all kinds of figures about the people in undocumented migrants in their city. So that should be taken into account, I think, in the MIRREM project. And I hope that the estimations that will come out of the project will not only say something about 1, 2, 3 million in Europe, or I don't know, 500,000 in Spain and 100,000 in the Netherlands, but also say something about the estimations on the local level, especially in the cities like here in Brussels or other cities, because that helps a lot about the questions, how many are there, and should we give them advice? One of the things we are also thinking about, and that can help, but that's more for the future of the estimation, is not giving a register in Padron, but giving them a city ID card, which are already in New York and in other countries, and Zurich is all, for example, also thinking about, and then without any threshold, because that can be interesting to know them and give them some advice. So that's a gain for them. And but then the numbers come more close to the reality. Thanks.